Folks, you were Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the challenge, what seems like the eternal challenge of having black and white populations living together and having equality and equity of outcome between the two racial groups. Now, the globalists are forcing this upon every white, hitherto 99.9% white country, whether it be in Western Europe or Britain or the United States or anywhere else. It's only white countries that it's happening to. There's no demand that China accepts, tens of millions of black people. But anyway, why are the outcomes so different? Why is it, for example, in the United States, as a proportion of the total of the different populations, black people in a state of poverty and intergenerational poverty and so on? What's made it so? Now, there are all sorts of arguments and claims and assertions being made. It's because of slavery, it's because of this and that and Jim Crow and so on. But that just doesn't stack up. It doesn't seem to really be an explanation at all. Now, gazillions have been all across the Western world. Gazillions have been thrown at this issue, whether it be the indigenous population of Australia, whether it be the black population in the United States, and so on. And of course, more recently in Britain. Given the black immigration that started in the 1950s to Britain. But there doesn't appear to be, the analysis, well, the outcomes are different. There are more, white kids going to university. There are more white people in the better paid jobs. There are more, professors or doctors, lawyers, scientists that are white people rather than black, and so on and so forth. So this is touted as, well, given the outcomes are different, it must mean something very evil is going on. If we correct the evil, then the outcomes will be the same. Now, that's an infantile assessment made from a bureaucrat who's still stayed a child or a radical undergraduate or something like that in the sociology or gender studies department. They can make those sorts of ridiculous analysis, but the reality is somewhat different. So let's have a little look at this sort of thing widely. I remember a while ago, some years ago now, there was a very famous and very successful black athlete from the 1950s in the United States at the supposed height of the racism and all that sort of stuff that was going on there, and he was one of the highest paid athletes in the United States at the time. And so much for the idea that blacks couldn't get ahead. But so he was very, very well paid, and yet he died in poverty, and he was sort of dragged into court for financial, not being able to pay bills or those sorts of things. And so I thought, how could somebody who made that much money be broke, on the bones of his ass? It seemed impossible to me, given the time. This is at the time when you could buy a house for $500, and this guy was pocketing $20,000 a month back in the day. So it was huge money. Now, why did he burn through his money so quickly? Well, it's not necessarily he lived a party lifestyle, although he did a bit of that. But the reality was that he came from that black tribal mentality where what you have, you share with your wider family and your tribe. So if your third cousin wants to do something or got in debt or got into trouble, and you needed to put up the bail money, then you would do that, and then the guy would skip bail, so you'd lose the money, and so on. So people were leading lifestyles around this black athlete, and they were parasiting off him. Let's call it what it is. But this wasn't a problem because he didn't perceive that he actually owned that money. The tribe or the wider family or the greater family, they owned it, and so he shared it with them. So his I have it, therefore I'll share it attitude, which means he kind of ran out of money, but he encouraged that. That sort of attitude's encouraged by the tribe and by the wider family, and they think that's fine, and they burn through their money and they waste it and they blow it on having a good time or on wasteful pursuits or blow it on money without acquiring assets in the process, and so on. So that was it. Now there's another one we probably all heard. Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, again one of the highest paid athletes in the United States during that time, and yet again he was frequently broke, and I didn't realize that until I sort of looked at a documentary recently that he was frequently broke. And there's another a number of these black boxers at the time, George Foreman and others, they made huge amounts of money in the fight game. Did very well at it. And again, some of it's like they were getting divorced and that was costing money. But aside from that, you look at the amount of money they were burning through was again this sort of I have it and I'll share it. So the money was communally owned as far as they were concerned. And then instead of having one wasteful person, they might have 100 wasteful people busily attempting to spend it and blow it. There's also, in the case of Muhammad Ali, he liked to have like a cheer squad entourage of hangers on around him, made him feel important and, all this sort of stuff. And he was paying for all of them. And that was an expensive business. Now, this is quite different from how, not all, but most white athletes who are well paid, they would be looking at realizing that their career was quite short. You can't be a boxer or an elite athlete for that long. Usually you have to be fairly young to do it, although George Foreman was still getting in the ring in his 40s. But so you've only got a short time to really make your big bucks. So you think you'd want to invest it wisely, have a good real estate portfolio maybe, and other investments and savings and things like that. But sure, you have a bit of fun. You have like the toy car or something like that. But basically, you say, well, I've got a short time to make my money. I got to make it count. I've got to make it work, because as soon as I'm not an athlete anymore, I'm not going to make anywhere near that sort of money. I'll be lucky to make a tiny percent of that. And we're talking about people that may have been sort of labourers or something like that, but they happen to be gifted at sport, but they're not good at anything outside of that sport. So they'll go back to being a labourer making shit money. So you think they'd make it count, but they don't. And I'm surprised about the amount, because sort of got me onto it. So I was looking at the highest paid black athletes of sort of all time, and how many of them were on the bones of their ass and had blown all that money. It seemed to be an astonishingly high proportion of these people who'd made the big money, who managed to lose it almost as quickly as they were making it, which is not easy to do given the gazillions they were making. So now let me come to a thing where this is an example in Australia that was decided a particular area of a pilot scheme would be launched, and they were determined to throw money at one of the more impoverished indigenous sort of areas or tribes in Australia. And bear in mind that Australia wasn't, before the white people came, wasn't like a nation of some homogenous nation. There were hundreds upon hundreds of tribes with different dialects, some so different they couldn't even understand each other. So there wasn't like a nation state here, and it's still, even to this day, quite tribal. So the government decided they were going to throw, no expense be said, they were going to throw money at this particular area, and they would give every black person a house, furnished house. They would give each black person a motor vehicle, and they would give them all a job. Now the jobs were bullshit jobs like park rangers and things that weren't really jobs, but they were sort of paid. So they all got a salary, these jobs, and it was serious money was being thrown at it with a lot of starry-eyed intent. And within not even 2 years, the houses nearly all burned down. The motor vehicles had just been left out in the middle of nowhere, and any money they got for the jobs, they just wouldn't turn up. It got the money was blown down on alcohol and whatever else they could lay their hands on, petrol sniffing and that sort of thing. And so it ended, like when it had done full circle, these people were worse off than before because their appetites had been whetted for freebies and handouts and duty-less entitlements and gifts. So they now that was now the standard they expected. And you white people have so much, why won't you share it with us? So what they were being given in their view was an entitlement. It wasn't a leg up. It wasn't something to say, okay, now I'm set up. So now if anyone's given a free house and a job, a paying job and a car and the furniture, you think they'd make the most of it. They go, wow, this is it. I don't have to live in poverty anymore. I don't have to worry about where the next paycheck's coming from or if I can afford to do it. But it didn't pan out there. Well, why not? Why not? Given this golden opportunity, why didn't they seize it with both hands? Why didn't they appreciate it? Why didn't they run with it and do something? Well, they decided that it's a cold day, and I forgot to, because they don't plan ahead, right? So I forgot to go and get firewood or whatever. So I'll just pull up the floorboards of the house and I'll use that. I don't feel like using the oven. I think I'll set a fire up in the middle of the lounge room floor and cook my food on that. Think those sorts of things, or I'll just pull down the wooden fence and I'll burn that for firewood. Why should I buy it? And on it goes. And then they look for, say, there's lead or copper or something, and so they know someone that they can sell that to for a few quick bucks. They go and buy all their friends and relatives alcohol, and they've got no money, so then they can't afford to pay the electricity bill. And now they could get that paid by the government if they could only be bothered to go down to the local government office to get that done, but they can't. They were given a free phone, but they sold that off at some sort of pawnbroker, so they don't have a phone now to call that. Can't be bothered to go down there. They drive the car around, and if they have it for long enough, they'll drive it until there's, the oil runs out and the engine seizes, or they'll just drive it until it runs out of petrol, and then they'll just leave it wherever, and then just walk away, and they've forgotten where it is, and it just rusts away, and it's a hulking mess by the time somebody finds it, and then the cost of trying to get out there and retrieve the car, and no one can be bothered with that. So it doesn't take them long to squander everything that's been given. Now, there was some sort of United Nations task force coming. They saw all these burned out houses. It's terrible the way the black people are treated. Look at these burned out wrecks of houses. That is terrible. Why don't you give them a nice house? Why do they have that? You fucking fascist, white supremacist, fucking Nazis. You're all Hitler. Look at the state of this house. Wait a minute. Hey, hold on a minute. That was a brand new house and they burned it down. So don't give me this crap about they're not being looked after. So this is the effect of being given handouts. So now the more handouts that are given, the greater the sense of entitlement. And if you've got that much that you can give it away, then why can't you give us more? You must have a lot. If you're giving us that for free, why can't you give us more stuff for free? So every 2 years, you have to give us another house so we can burn that down, and then another one so we can burn that down, and so on. So that's some examples of why the outcomes are different. Now, white people who are not being given free houses and free cars and free four-wheel drives and all this sort of thing, and free jobs and all that sort of stuff, they do a whole lot better because they conserve and look after what they've got, whereas these people don't. Now, another thing is that there's these special sort of rural schools that are set up specially for Aboriginal kids, and they used to have white teachers, but no, that's racist. You have to have Aboriginal teachers. If you haven't got Aboriginal teachers, it means you're a fascist, and so on. So they did all these little things around, but they can't get Aboriginal kids to reliably turn up to school in anything resembling a frequent basis. Now, all sorts of things are, it's because of the patriarchy, white man's this or so and so that, Hitler such and such. There's all that stuff gets thrown around as read, but the bottom line is the same. It's very difficult to socialize a tribal people into a Western culture. It's very difficult. Not that it can't be done, not that it'll work in some instances, but as a mass sort of as an average, it doesn't work and may never work. And to run around blaming, it's all white people's fault because they're all Hitler. That's rather missing the point. So I don't know if it's at all possible to achieve the equity outcome just on the basis of throwing money at it or running around accusing people of being Nazi and that sort of thing. Just people who we know who've married, white girls marrying black guys. It's the same. They're not even when they've got a white wife and white relatives, they still don't socialize into the Western way of doing things. And if you look at a lot of black people in the United States that have been living in the Caribbean or the United States for 400 years, they still have the same tribal attitude of their African. It's like they never left Africa. They've still got the same tribal attitudes there. And people sort of wonder, why is it that rich countries in Africa, when they're run by the white people, suddenly turn into basket cases when the black people take over? It's the same thing. It's the same attitude. We want it now. We don't think about maintaining the equipment or machinery for tomorrow, and one machinery for tomorrow. And when it's all gone, well, it's gone. Okay, fine, it's gone, and off they go and just sort of wander around and still with a sense of entitlement, but not caring that what they had is now all gone. And I think this is the wider issue that needs to be dealt with. I would, rather than throw resources at it and complain about Nazis everywhere, I would do it differently. Now, not that previous things haven't been tried in the past, because the problem was so intractable. In the early 1900s, the Australian government decided to, if there was a completely dysfunctional family, if an Aboriginal kid didn't have a direct relative to look after them, they would, rather than be looked after by the tribe, they would take the Aboriginal kid out and put them with a white family. Now, sometimes these were equivalent of orphanages, say that were run by religious groups, but often it was they would go into families where they would be brought up as a white child, white child would, and sent to a school, white school, often a private school, sent to the university and so on. And I don't know, it made a difference to because they only had white people around them. So they made a difference to that, but they nearly all not all, but nearly all defaulted back to being, we're injured members of an oppressed tribe and we demand compensation and endless handouts. So that really didn't work either. It's now condemned as being, look how fascist it was. Little black children ripped from the arms of their tribe and put with fascist Nazi white families. Hitler! And so that's the narrative that they run now. So given the confines of the narrative and the frantic absurdity of the claims by the social justice groups, I don't know if it's even possible. And it's such a gravy train now that, like racism and all these sort of things, the social workers, and it's become an industry that they must have this. They must have the grievances, alive and trembling all the time, because that justifies their jobs and they don't want the problem solved. They want it to go on because that's how they benefit. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.